All right, so we did talk about social engineering briefly during the past few videos. Now let's spend a bit more time understanding all the intricacies, all the details that make up this very interesting type of attack. Now, social engineering, or how I like to call it, and I'm not the only one who likes to call it that way, is hacking the human. That is, attacking, not necessarily physically, but that's a valid option as well, attacking or trying to exploit the weaknesses in human behavior. The tendency of people to trust, the tendency of people to obey authority. And the end result is to convince a person to provide you with sensitive information, or to convince a person to execute some actions on your behalf. In most cases, social engineering is being performed against employees of a company that you're targeting, so that they can either disclose some sensitive information about the company, about the network or the security systems in there, or even their password, or in order to convince them to click on a link to download or execute some piece of malware that helps you establish a foothold for a future attack. So the fundamental principles of social engineering can be summed up in one single word: impersonation. Pretending to be somebody else. Pretending to be somebody else that either has authority over the person that you're targeting or is trusted by the person that you're targeting. You could, for example, impersonate somebody from the IT department and convince a user to click a link, or to reset their password using a link crafted by you, of course a malicious link, or to convince them to install some piece of software on your machine, saying that it's part of a company-wide security deployment, or pretending to be some subcontractor or a partner of that company, asking even the IT department to help them to generate a valid user account, or to help them connect through the VPN. And impersonation can even be performed in a physical manner, as in for gaining physical access inside of a building. There's an old joke in security saying that there's no telling how far you can get inside of a building if you're wearing some a maintenance vest. If you act like a delivery man, if you're pretending to deliver pizza, if you're pretending to be working on the air conditioning system, or you need access in the basement to fix something in the data center, or any method of impersonating someone that suggests that their very presence is there to be helpful, tends to bypass the normal security checks that are being done while entering a building, tends to bypass any kind of security measures that are in place. And on the basis of impersonation, you could rely on the fact that people who appear to be likable, to be familiar, have better chances of convincing other people to do stuff for them. I mean, if you ask nicely, if you look like you would be very grateful if you would receive help, a lot of people might offer themselves to help you out, to enter the building, maybe to set up your email account, or any other security-related tasks such as those. And the danger of this is that there's almost no risk to it. I mean, if the person that you're targeting doesn't want to help you, it's not going to be a security incident. It's simply going to be I'm sorry, I cannot help you right now, or the company policy doesn't allow me to do this, but you're not going to be flagged as an attacker. So you can try a different person. You can try somebody else in the next minute. A very interesting principle is social proof. This one describes the fact that in absence of any further instructions, most people will behave as they see people behaving around them. It's kind of like I know it sounds bad, but it's some type of herd behavior, right? If people don't know what to do, they'll go where everyone goes. If people don't know what to buy, they'll buy what the three people in front of them have already bought. If people don't know whether a request coming from the so-called IT department is valid or not, simply implying the fact that everybody else has complied so far, you're the last person. We weren't able to find you during the lunch break. Right now, you're the last person who hasn't clicked on this link, who hasn't installed this security update on your machine. So everybody else did it. It should be okay. It must be okay for me to do it as well. That's social proof. This one can be easily exploited, especially for people who are not that security conscious, in order to make them perform specific actions on behalf of an attacker. Authority is another difficult one and dangerous one. That's because most people are, educated to respect authority, to respect law officers, to respect people in charge, to respect when they're being told by a manager to do something. So if you're able to impersonate somebody that is supposed to have a position of authority over that victim, it's that much easier to convince them to do something that they should comply with immediately. Next one, artificial scarcity or false urgency. I really like this one. This is the one that you're always going to see manifested in sales, especially in online or TV commercials. It used to be very often used in teleshopping. Telemarketers used this extremely often. That is creating the impression, the false impression, suggesting the fact that if you don't make up your mind and you don't take action right now, it's going to be too late later on. You're missing out on something. So it appeals to the FOMO, the fear of missing out of people. Also appears to their sentiment of guilt. I mean, false urgency might be coming back to the first example where, everybody else in your department has already installed this piece of software. We really need this done right now because otherwise we're going to exceed the deadline and we are exposed. You're going to be the only person responsible for not implementing this security update. And imagine what your boss is going to say about this. You have to act right now. You don't have time to go ask your boss if you're allowed to do this or not. You're the last person. You have to act right now. That's false urgency. Artificial scarcity, well, this one applies more to sales, right? Because if you're not buying right now the last item on sale, you're going to miss it forever and you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Or it might be, in case of social engineering from a security perspective, masked as let's say a link in an email that you are the lucky winner of something, that you have been especially selected by invitation. You have been selected out of 1,000 participants to access this bonus feature, to download this prize, this piece of malware, right? I'm sure you've seen those ads online that try to suggest that your computer is infected with malware and you have to click on the ad to download their solution, their anti-malware solution, which is actually their anti-malware problem, and install it on your machine. That again is an example of false urgency. And one more time, don't forget about physical social engineering, directly interacting with people, in order for them to provide you access to secure areas or to gain physical access to real documents. And one example of this one that I really like is called dumpster diving. That is diving through the garbage generated by a company. Usually that garbage is not secured, or it is not in a secure enclave somewhere. It might not even be on their perimeter. But that garbage might include a lot of confidential, sensitive data, confidential documents, interesting information that might be a goldmine for a security researcher or an attacker. Another way to exploit the human factor when gaining physical access to a building is called tailgating. You know what that is? That is watching for somebody open a secure door, for example, the company door, and then quickly following after that person before the door gets a chance to close. That's tailgating. You don't want to do it like that. Is it going to look awkward and suspicious? Well, you can do it in a piggybacking manner. Piggybacking means that you are actually asking somebody to hold the door, right? Hold the door open for me, or just help me out because my hands are full. I'm carrying all these boxes in here. I'm trying to make a delivery. I'm trying to make a living here. Just please open the door for me so I can enter the building quicker, right? That's piggybacking. That's basically tailgating with the approval of an authorized person. And social engineering, unfortunately, doesn't stop here. Doesn't stop with the actual attempt to steal credentials or to gain access to confidential information. It can even go further and lead to impersonation from identity theft, which is really bad. This can be used to impersonate somebody or to create some fake credentials, which is extremely bad because in case of digital identities inside of a company, well, the attacker basically is going to gain access just like a regular user. The attacker might become, from the perspective of the internal security mechanisms, a valid employee, which can act with no restrictions. This can be performed by stealing credentials, compromising credentials. There are a lot of methods of doing so, apart from, guessing them or stealing them from the actual people. A lot of the data breaches out there actually target credential databases. Yeah, when a company, a website, a web service, a database is compromised and is the victim of a data breach, all those user accounts, perhaps even along with their personally identifiable information, financial information, credit card info, sometimes even the passwords, even though the passwords should not be stored in clear text, but sometimes they are, that information gets exposed. And those credentials become compromised. Now, there's a website called haveibeenpawned.com, which you can use to enter your email or your phone number and see if that email or phone number has been part of a known data breach. Go ahead and try it right now. Pause this video, try it right now before it's too late. You will be surprised. I can guarantee you this. Another method of stealing credentials, basic one actually, is shoulder surfing. What is that? Well, just watching what a person does, what type of credentials they're entering, their username, their password, over their shoulders. It happens all the time, especially in open spaces. And even though it refers to actually being close to that person, right next to it and looking over their shoulder, it can be performed using even remote video capture, remote cameras, even drones outside the windows. Lunchtime attacks. These are another very interesting category of attacks, which is kind of basic if you think about it. A lunchtime attack refers to the fact that very often a workstation is strongly dependent on the physical security of that workstation. That is, if an attacker has direct access, can interact with that workstation, with that laptop, for example, well, a lot of the security measures have already been bypassed. A lunchtime attack is an attack that can happen during the so-called lunchtime when employees get up from their desks and forget to lock their computers, so that anybody who goes through that open space, through those offices, can sit at any desk and interact with those computers. Now, as you can probably guess, of course, this attack doesn't always happen during the lunchtime. And finally, a couple of the objectives of stealing these credentials could be for performing identity fraud, just like we talked before, stealing credentials in order to access the resources that those users have access to, so for stealing confidential information, or for creating financial fraud based on fake invoicing. If you are able to generate fake invoices that are automatically accepted by the finance department, you can basically, pay yourself from the money of that compromised company. And yes, there are even more methods of social engineering, some of them based on a specific communication channel, such as, most often than not, email. And the most often method for performing social engineering over email is called phishing. This is about tricking somebody into accessing the resource that they perceive as being trustworthy, when in fact the resource, well, is not. It belongs to the attacker. It can host a sort of a malicious content. It might be just a fake authentication page aimed at stealing the credentials of the person that enters their credentials in there. And we have a couple of subcategories here for phishing. First one being spear phishing. Spear phishing means that the target is not just opportunistic. So it's not some sort of a mass spam campaign that targets anybody who is fool enough to click on the link, but it is a directed campaign to a specific department or a specific company. Of course, such an attack becomes more dangerous because in this case, the attacker can actually customize or custom tailor those messages so that they appear much more trustworthy. They can use the internal, let's say the signature that is used inside of the company. They can direct that email to, or CC that email to some other valid accounts inside of the company, so it looks like a legitimate email, and people tend to trust emails that are being sent by their work colleagues. And even higher up the chain, we have whaling, not hunting whales, but we are hunting high-level executives like CEOs, CXOs inside of a company. We're targeting their computers, their account, their credentials, which are more often than not a gold mine for a potential attacker because they do have access to all the confidential information inside of the company. And they can also be sometimes blackmailed. Phishing is the same type of attack, but this time conducted over a voice connection, over the phone, for example, voice conference over instant messaging. Smishing, kind of bad name here actually. This one refers to those spam messages sent over SMS. Usually these target vulnerabilities in the phone or the data that is stored on that victim's mobile phone. Of course, Android devices are a bit more vulnerable to this type of attack because iOS devices are much more locked down than Android ones. Finally, on the lines of spam and email, in general, of course, we find spam. Everybody knows what is spam. Unsolicited email that you're receiving and might tempt you to click on a specific link. Email hoaxes, usually chain emails, emails that warn you about bogus security threats out there and try to convince you to install a specific security countermeasure, which of course is a malware in itself. And email prepending is a stupidly simple method of making an email message look trustworthy. There are situations, I'm sure you've seen them, where if an email passes through a security device, it might say in the subject line that, attachment safe or scanned or something like that. Well, you can, of course, craft that subject line and make it look part of an email chain with some replies in front of it and then some tags in there that says that this email has been scanned by this security solution and has been validated as being safe. And then, of course, comes the actual content of the email, which is far from being safe. But people who are used to seeing that type of notice, especially if it's a security solution or an antivirus solution that is widely used inside of that company, well, people automatically trust it. Oh, say, okay, this email has been validated. I don't know what that file is inside of that attachment in there, but if our security solution says that the email is safe, then I'm going to click it. All right, why not? And to introduce some new terms in here, still on the page of stealing credentials, we had 3 terms that we need to know about. First of all, there's farming with a PH. Now, farming relies on a technical type of attack which makes that victim's computer resolve a domain name to a fake IP address. So it relies on corrupting the DNS cache, or it relies on hacking the actual DNS server that the victim computer is using. But whenever they try to access their bankwebsite.com, instead of resolving that domain name to a valid website that belongs to their bank, it's going to resolve it to a website that is hosted by the attacker. All right. And of course, if the website looks the same, the user is going to enter their credentials and going to receive an error when in fact those credentials have been nicely forwarded to the attacker. Typo squatting, again, is a very simple method of trying to gather valid user accounts simply by registering domain names that closely resemble well-known services or well-known companies on the internet. Simply by changing an O to a 0, or just doubling a letter, or just making an intentional typo between 2 adjacent letters on the keyboard, because many people sometimes mistype those domain names when they're trying to access websites such as Google or Amazon or Netflix or any well-known services out there. And sometimes they're going to type, I don't know, Netflix, all right, with an M. Well, somebody might register that name, make a page that looks like the Netflix regular login page, and steal your Netflix credentials when you happen to hit that web page and enter your credentials in there. That's typo squatting. And another type of attack is called the watering hole attack. It refers to the habit of wild animals who periodically gather around watering holes in order to drink water. Well, that also might happen inside of a company. Let's say if everybody in a company frequently visits the same pizza delivery website, right, in order to order pizza for somebody's birthday or for lunch. All right. If you know that a lot of people in the company use from time to time that website as a watering hole, what do you think? What's going to be easier, to crack the authentication system of an IT company or to crack the website of a pizza company? So if you crack the website of a pizza company, you can inject some malware in there, which then you can be sure that is going to attack the victims from the company that you're targeting whenever they access that website on a regular basis. right? So basically, instead of infecting the victim, you're infecting the food source for that victim, right? And finally, we also have a special type of social engineering, which is called an influence campaign. It's not about those type of influencers. It's about those who influence public opinion on political matters, on elections, on anything that the public opinion should not be influenced on. Oftentimes, these are networks of bots, of fake accounts, some of them directed by machine learning algorithms that constantly scan social media, try to promote fake news, fake websites, try to even to comment on news, giving them the appearance of being from a legitimate source and trying to change the public opinions or to influence the public opinions on a specific sensitive matter. And I'm sure you've had plenty of examples during the past years of this happening. Unfortunately, it's a mass scale level type of social engineering, which is really, really tough to control. And it is at home in most social media platforms. Well, social engineering is one of my favorite topics actually in all cybersecurity. And as you can see, it is about cybersecurity, but it's not about cybersecurity. It's about a human element. It's about human nature, which is an endless source of interesting information and of fun sometimes. So if you want to contribute more, if you want to talk more about this topic, leave a comment in the comment section. If you like this and if you enjoy this, like and subscribe. Good luck on your studies and see you on the next video. Thank you and bye-bye.